side with the statements of their statewide union leaders.
Did you ever consider dropping your collective bargaining demands? Did you ever consider that?
For us, to me, I was a county elected official for 8 years. We talk about shared sacrifice because my county faced a crisis. I gave over those 8 years $370,000 of my personal salary back. I made a personal sacrifice, just like I'm going to pay for more for pension and more for health care as governor of the state of Wisconsin. During that time, I repeatedly met with my unions and asked them to make modest changes in pension and health care contributions. In fact, one year, I even asked them to consider a couple of 35-hour work weeks in order to avoid massive layoffs. And every time, the response I got from AFSCME was, go ahead, lay 400 or 500 people off, we don't care. To me, that's why when I talk about protecting the middle class, I'm not just talking about middle-class taxpayers outside of government. Those middle-class workers that would have been laid off are people I represent as well, just like I do in the state of Wisconsin. If I have to choose between massive layoffs or making these sorts of reforms, I'd much rather stand on the side of protecting those middle-class jobs and protecting middle-class taxpayers. Because remember, the vast majority of people in the middle class in my state and across the country have been paying the bill for the expanse of government year after year after year. And to me, those are the people I'm standing up to protect. And you'll never hear me speak an ill word throughout this entire debate. No matter what others may say out there, I have never said an ill word of any of the decent public servants who work, the 300,000 decent people in my state who work for both state and local government. I have great respect for them. I just know that in this together, we've got to make changes to make sure their jobs are protected into the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. The Chair now recognizes the Chairman of the subcommittee, Mr. McHenry, for his round of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Governor Walker, I certainly appreciate your testimony. Governor Shumlin, thank you so much as well. There's this discussion of tough choices. Now, when we're looking at what the government does, right, there are services that municipalities and states render to their people as a matter of collection of their tax revenue, whether it's local governments providing police and protection through the police, or making sure that if somebody's house is on fire, you have a fireman show up. So there are tough choices between the services that the government provides and the obligations it has. So, Governor Walker, can you discuss this challenge for a governor who walks into a very tough budget situation? The challenge between, do you continue to provide these services people expect, taxpayers expect, or do you continue providing a benefit for a select few? Meaning, you have a pension obligation, you have health care benefits and these types of things. The people that are getting the benefit are largely not paying to receive. And then you have the taxpayers who are footing the bill for them. Can you discuss that challenge?
Sure. Again, I'll tell you, not only as a governor for the last couple months, but as a county official for 8 years prior to that, for us, we saw the distinction. We saw the challenge when, under the environment before we passed this bill into law, for local governments in particular, we were forced with the sacrifice like I faced, or the problem we faced, where when we had a tough budget time, and we had it long before 2008 because of the pension scandal I inherited back in 2002. So we were dealing this ahead of the curve even before the economic meltdown. When we tried to make, as I mentioned before, I think some very reasonable changes when it came to what us as government employees paid for things like pension and health care, or even some other adjustments temporarily as part of the work week, we did that for two reasons. One, to try and protect as many jobs as possible. And two, in turn, because those jobs provide services, to try and protect core services for the people we serve. That's essentially the impetus for me when I looked at the budget crisis we were facing going into the next 2-year cycle of $3.6 billion. I knew we had to make a fundamental change if we weren't going to go down the path that many other governors across the country are, Democrat and Republican alike, where they're cutting billions of dollars from schools, from university systems, from local governments and other areas that affect all the things you mentioned. And instead they're saying, okay, there are the cuts. Now you either make it up through massive layoffs or you make it up through massive property tax increases. I said in my state, I can't afford to have anybody, be they in the public or the private sector, any more massive layoffs. I need more people working. We're changing the business climate. We're showing, in fact, many of the issues Republican and Democrats alike we brought together to pass legislation that made us one of the most proactive pro-job agendas in the country. We had to do all that. We want to protect jobs. By the same token, we know one of the other things that would cut down that recovery would be a massive tax increase. We saw it 2 years ago when my predecessor raised taxes on corporations and on individuals. We saw the jobs leave. We saw the exodus. We want those people to come back.
And I understand competitiveness, especially in the Midwest, in terms of job creation, and so there's competition on tax rates, obviously, right?
Absolutely. We love the fact that while our corporate tax rate is 7.9%, the effective tax rate in Illinois is now 9.5%.
Well,
we love that distinction because we want more people to come up to Wisconsin.
Well, thank you. And the other question I have is, so, you know, as opposed to a private sector pension, where those that are receiving the pension benefit are the ones that are affected by the changes. They're the only ones really affected. The difference with that and public sector pensions is that we as taxpayers have to foot that bill. So it's not simply a lie perpetrated to the beneficiary of or the recipient of the pension, saying perhaps too rosy a scenario on return on investment or underfunding these pensions and so on and so forth. It's also a lie to those taxpayers that have to foot the bill for those underfunded pensions or less than funded pensions. So my question to you, Governor Walker, is do you believe that there's sufficient transparency and disclosure with public sector pensions today?
Well, I think at both the state and the local level as well, there needs to be more transparency. One of the things we're the most proud about this budget is not only that we balanced the $3.6 billion deficit, but the fact that 2 years ago we had the largest structural deficit in state history. In my budget I presented at the beginning of March to the state legislature, we reduced the structural deficit by more than $2 billion, a 90% reduction. It's where Moody's pointed out that they called it credit positive. When's the last time you heard anything called credit positive related to a government budget? They call it credit positive because we finally took control of what we should have been doing for years and weren't from both political parties. That is incredibly positive. But the more people know about it, right now, you know, actuaries and a lot of others pay attention to pensions and retirement systems. All of us should be, because that's just deferring. In many cases, it's been about deferring the problem to the next generation. We can't do that anymore.
Thank you. And I know my time has expired, but certainly those that are arguing now about public sector pensions, you have those that are saying that these pensions are underfunded and it's bad. Those are the optimists. Those that look at the pension system and say this is a calamity are the other side of the coin. No one is saying that public sector pensions are too well funded or even sufficiently funded. So thank you for your...
And the one thing important to remember, I mentioned the Illinois-Wisconsin distinction. Not only are they half funded, but you have the Speaker of the General Assembly, a Democrat, a longtime union ally, spoke a month ago about the possibility of reducing the pension benefit itself. That's what happens when you don't take these issues seriously. That's not a Republican or Democrat issue. This is someone who's been a stalwart defender of unions, is now talking about in Illinois the prospect of reducing the benefit. That, to me, would be unacceptable. We made a promise to our public servants about what the retirement benefits were going to be. We should protect that no matter what party we're in. We just got to fix it on the way in.
Thank you, Governor. We now recognize the former chairman of the full committee, Mr. Towns, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.